And the next topic we are going to talk about is get rid of your reducer boilerplate. And Richard and G will cover this topic for you. Richard is a software engineering coach, and coding teacher trainer. He's worked with many initiatives helping underrepresented groups get into tech. Code Your Future, Coder of Color, White Hat, and Black Coder. Professionally, he's a coach developer. He has coached developers at consultancies, startups, and multinationals, including Public Sapient, Starling Bank, and Improbable, trying to gather his background in teaching edtech and startups. So, welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Anna.
I'm happy to see you here on our conference.
Delighted to be here.
So if you're ready to share your screen to start your speech, so you can tell us, and
Absolutely.
we'll help you with this.
So, yeah, thank you all for joining. I'm here to talk to you about, exactly like Anna said, reducers, state management, boilerplate, and getting rid of it. So this is for you if you use hooks. So maybe you use reducer, or you're interested in using use reducer, or maybe you use Redux. In both cases, you have to think about reducers, and that comes with boilerplate. And boilerplate, if we can minimize it, it's great, we can. So with this library, reduce, with just 2 lines of setup, we get state management that is type, flexible, and scalable, and it plugs into either use reducer or into Redux. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today. And as a bit of background and context, we look at the state of front-end survey. This came out quite recently, and you can see that React hooks and context, along with Redux, are both like way ahead in terms of what front-end developers use for state management. It's just under half use at least one or the other. They're not mutually exclusive, some use both. And the way that the report wrote this up was quite interesting, I thought, where the report said, oh, it's like this major change is happening. People are kind of going to hooks and context over Redux, which I think is like maybe an unhelpful characterization. It makes it sound like there's this sort of thing where you've got these developers who use Redux, and suddenly they're like, whoa, use reduce, use context. Like, yeah, I'm going to use that. And they actually, you can use both. So they've got different use cases. So if you just wanted to try and solve prop drilling and pass your props down to deeply nested components, then use reducer and use context will be great for that. If you want to do complex asynchronous logic, personally, I really like Redux Saga, and so Redux gets you access to the Redux ecosystem. So there's different choices based on different use cases, and I'm not here to say use one or the other. I'm here to say, well, whichever you're using, there's some really interesting stuff in common in terms of the reducer boilerplate, which we can optimize. So this reducer boilerplate basically comes from the Flux architecture, which both have their origins in. So Redux was explicitly an implementation of Flux architecture. Use reducer is explicitly inspired by Redux, so they can both be traced back. Flux architecture, here's a quick diagrammatic overview from Facebook. It's sort of developed as an alternative to model view controller. I'm not going to dwell on this too long, but in essence, the important things here is view as a function of state. We have actions that happen, and these actions go into a dispatcher, and the dispatcher's job is to take different incoming actions and pass them through to a store, which holds the current state. It looks at incoming actions and it updates state, and therefore, because state is updated, view updates because view is a function of state. At a sort of higher level, I know this can feel quite abstract. When I first looked at Flux architecture, I was like, I'm not sure I completely get this. So here is kind of, in essence, the skeleton of Flux architecture with Redux and use reducer, where regardless of whether you're using Redux or whether you're using use reducer, in both cases, you've got a reducer you pass in, and where that comes from will come to you later. And in both cases, the things I want to focus on, you get back 2 things: a way to read state through either the getState function or a state value, and a dispatch function, which is a way to update state. And then you update the state by passing in some action. And that action flows through to the reducer, which looks at state, takes the action, and then updates, returns a new value of state. And so following this sort of reducer function signature. So Redux and useReducer are doing the same thing in terms of Flux architecture, giving you a way to read state and a way to update state through a dispatch function. And what you can see really drives it is the reducer and the actions. If you don't have a reducer, then neither works. Both require the reducer as a fundamental engine, and both require the actions to really drive changes in the reducer. So what that means then is, if we think about this, and every time that new state management comes out, I think people are like, whoa, maybe I don't have to use Redux anymore because I can use this new thing. And I think this comes from the fact that Redux has a bit of a reputation for having lots of boilerplate, high learning curve, lots to maintain, very verbose, maybe tedious. And so when new state management kind of techniques come out, people are like, great, maybe I never have to write all this Redux boilerplate again. But what I think useReducer shows us is it makes it clear this boilerplate is actually Flux architecture boilerplate. It's not Redux per se. It's boilerplate which comes with Flux because Redux is based on Flux architecture, and useReducer is also using Flux architecture in terms of your reducers and your actions. And so useReducer and useContext doesn't solve at the core the problem of Reducer boilerplate. It's not trying to solve that problem. It's an implementation of Flux architecture. But I find that boilerplate super, super boring to write and maintain. So I think there's a better way to do it. And here's how we're going to kind of go through this talk through like 5 emojis, 5 stages. So firstly, ouch, is we're going to look at what does that typical reducer boilerplate look like. And we'll see why maybe it's frustrating. Then in the ooh section, I'm going to show you how we can use reduce. And it's literally 2 lines to get rid of all your boilerplate. Then gosh, we're going to look at some more advanced usage of the reduce library. So the default stuff gets you quite far away, but maybe you want to do some more advanced stuff. And that's in this section here. Then in Woe, we're going to look at TypeScript, right? Because that's a question now. New library comes out. Does it work with TypeScript? Well, reduce is first pass TypeScript support. And this section is also going to be accessible. Even if you never use TypeScript, it'll be in a way which I hope you can understand. And then if we get time, which I suspect we won't, but if we do, we'll look at building a React app with Reduce and useReducer. So to begin with, just a heads up for that boilerplate, which is coming in. This is not the way I necessarily recommend you write your code, but this is just a tour of, well, how do we do this boilerplate at the moment? So here, let's say we're at a conference. So I'm going to control or manage some conference state. And let's say this is actually before the pandemic. So my conference state is going to have a venue. And my venue is going to be open. And unfortunately, at the moment, my venue is not accessible. We're going to fix that later. And my venue also, or there's also maybe a number of attendees, which let's say it's a very popular conference. Let's say it's 9,000 for now. I have my conference state. And we notice the problem. The problem is that it's not accessible. So we're going to think about how can we update this state, but we want to do this in a Flux architecture way, which follows a flow for useReducer and for Redux. In this particular demo, I'm going to use Redux. It's slightly easier to demo line by line, but the exact same thing would work for useReducer. So I'm going to import from Redux the create store function. And I'm going to kind of sketch out what this looks like. So with create store, we pass in some reducer, which we don't have at the moment. We're going to have to get that at some point. And that gives us back the 2 important things which we want to use for Flux architecture, a way to read state and a way to update state. We read with get state, we update with dispatch. And at this point here, once we've got that, we should be able to read our state. And when we read it to begin with, the venue is accessible. That should be false originally. Then we want to update state somehow. And after we updated state, then when I look at the venue and I check whether it's accessible, I hope that this is now true. And in the Flux architecture, the way that I'm going to update state is going to be by dispatching some action. And if we were using use reducer, then it would be const state dispatch equals use reducer. So again, you can see that it's the exact same pattern, really. Okay, so now we've kind of got these two gaps to fill in, the reducer and the actions. And remember, this is the engine that drives the Flux architecture. And this is now the typical boilerplate way that you might write your reducer. So I'm going to say my reducer is a function. It takes two arguments. So it takes some previous state and it takes an action. And in Redux, we default this to your initial state. And the classic way of writing this is we do a switch statement over your action type. If you've not seen this before, don't worry, we're going to kind of scrap all this boilerplate later anyway. And by default, we're going to return the previous state with no changes. But I'm interested, I want to make the venue accessible. So I'm going to write a case to do that. So I'm going to say venue made accessible. And in this particular case, well, I need to not mutate my state. So I'm going to need to spread out everything from conference state, then go into venue and spread out my my previous state, that should be. Spread out my previous state, and then spread out my previous state.venue, and then is accessible, that should be true. And this is a little bit ugly. You've kind of got that kind of spread hell thing, but it's okay. And now I can stick that reducer in here. Now, indeed, I get my venue.isAccessible. That's come out as false. Great. Now I need something to dispatch to it. I'm going to do it in the classic action creator way. And I'm going to write a function, therefore, make venue accessible. And this is going to be a function that just returns me an object with type venue made accessible. And I'm now going to stick that here, make venue accessible, and execute it to create the action. And now I get that as true. So this is the classic sort of boilerplate way of doing it, where you've got your reducer you manually write and an action creator you might write. And this is okay for one case, like we got it to work. But actually now the pain point is going to arise when I want to do more stuff. So let's say I also want to close my venue. So I want to, at conference state.venue.isOpen, I want this to be false. This feels basically the same as what we just did. You know, it's really, again, quite simple to describe. So what I want to happen is I want to get state, when I read venue.isOpen, currently it's true. I want to dispatch something. And then when I read it after, it should be false. But now in order to actually make this go through, I need to make loads of changes to my engine, actually. I need to now add another case in. Case venue closed. And I need to turn, and this is really, really repetitive. And I'm actually really bored writing this out again, because I just want to make the changes happen. Is open, false. But then I also need an action creator, const close venue. There we go. And I'm going to return type venue closed. And now I'm going to stick that here. Close venue. And that's not working because I made a typo. Fine. Okay. That was really boring and tedious. I didn't enjoy that at all. And now let's say I want to now increment my number of attendees. Again, that's going to be so tedious. I'm going to have to write another case statement for that. And this kind of logic, which is really simple, it's really simple for us to describe how we want our state to change. You know, I want this to be true. I want this to be false. I want that to be true. I want to increment this. It's easy to describe. There's so many hurdles for us to jump through. in order to actually get this working with this sort of boilerplate of our engine. So I'm not a fan of that. And this really made me think, well, what if we could get rid of that reducer boilerplate? So I want this to be something where I don't feel like I'm jumping through hoops, where I can just, if I can think about the changes, I can just make them happen. So I can concentrate on actually building out my UI. And I want this to scale flexibly as well, where if every time I add new things into my state, I don't really want to be adding in new cases because that's just boring. And that means as my state grows, my boilerplate grows with it. I want my boilerplate to be something I write once and I just forget about it. And I never have to touch it again. And I also ideally want it to be strongly typed so that I can use it nicely with TypeScript. And that's why I wrote reduce. So whether you're using use reducer or Redux, then you will find that this is going to give you zero hassle setup, it's going to scale flexibly, and it's going to be strongly typed. So let's look at the first of those benefits then, zero hassle, where it's 2 lines to set up, and then you can reduce anywhere in your state tree. So let's go back to all this horrible, horrible boilerplate, and I'm literally just going to delete all of it. Like, get rid of that. And these here for now, I'll leave as empty objects, but we'll delete them shortly or get rid of them soon. And 2 lines of setup. Okay, here we go. I'm going to import reduce from reduce. That's line 1. Line 2. So I've got my state, right? And I'm saying, well, I just want my engine. Just please give me my engine so I can drive changes. So if you pass your state to reduce, reduce gives you back your engine, which remember, it's 2 things. It's your reducer and your actions. They drive Flux architecture, but they're painful to write. So actually, wow, if we could just get back a reducer and get back some actions, that would make our life so much easier. And that reducer, we can pop straight into the kind of either use reducer or create store. And now let's think about these action creators, which before we had to like write the case and get it to talk to our reducer. But these 2 things, they're a pair. They already talk to each other. And so you no longer have to manually wire them up. So what do I mean by that? Let's think about the change we want to happen with make venue accessible. What I would like to happen is kind of like I've got my state and @venue, @isAccessible. What I want to do is I want to create an action, and the action should make this Boolean state true. So kind of turn it on, let's say. That's kind of what I want to do. That's the change I'm describing. And reduce is going to make it super easy for me to do that, where I'm just going to stitch that together. State is undefined. But hey, what about this actions thing here? Let's use that. And make venue accessible is doing this. It's an action @venue is accessible. I'm creating an action there, and I'm turning that state on. And now, if you look, when I dispatch make venue accessible, venue is accessible is true. So close venue, how would that work? So at the moment, we don't have, currently the venue's open, and we want that to be false. So let's think about the change we want to make. So actions, it traces out your state tree. So actions, where do I want to make the change? In venue, not @is accessible, @is open. That's what I want to change this time. And there I want to create an action, but not an on action this time. I want to create an off action because I want to turn the Boolean state off. And now when I close venue, state venue is open, now it's false. So let's look at some more examples of that. And you actually don't have to, you could abstract into functions like this, but you could also just do it directly. So what I mean by that is let's now look at attendees. So get state.attendees. Currently it's 9,000. Now I want to increment some states. I want to increase the number of attendees. Before, I would have had to add a new case into my switch statement, would have had to write an action creator if I wanted to. I don't have to do any of that now. Now, I just describe the change I want to see. So actions, not in venue, but at attendees, that's a number I want to act on. I want to create an action to increment. I'm going to execute that to create the action. And now if I look at state.attendees, that's 9,001. It's been incremented. What if I want to increment by a larger number? Well, I can just pass in an argument. 500, and I'm incremented by 500. And I said you could reduce anywhere in your state tree and it's going to scale. So let's add some more state in. Let's add some announcements. And we'll start off with just a hello world announcement. So now let's take a look at that. So now I'm going to look at my announcements. That's an array hello world. So again, it's super easy to describe the change I want, and reduce makes it easy to create that change as well. Where if I want to create a new announcement, I change my state, and already I can now just immediately start driving my Flux engine, actions.announcements. I'm going to create an action there. I'm going to push something, and I'm going to push something like reduce is cool. And now, if I look at my state announcements, hello world, reduce is cool. Let's maybe make this nice in caps, reduce is cool. So I was there acting on the array, but reduce lets you act anywhere in your state tree. So maybe I want to act on hello world. So where is this in my state? It's inside actions.announcements. It's in that array, and it's the 0th one. And I want to create an action to act on this string, hello world. And I want to maybe add some exclamation marks. So I'm going to concat a bunch of exclamation marks. And now, when I get state.announcements, hello world has the exclamation marks. So reduce gives you back this reducer actions pair. The reducer plugs straight into create store or use reducer, and actions knows straight away how to talk to its reducer. And you just describe the change you want, and you can act anywhere you want. So that is the basic zero hassle setup of reduce. 2 lines, and you can reduce anywhere in your state tree because you've got the reducer and the actions to really drive those changes. Now we're going to look at more advanced usage of reduce. We're going to look at how you can scale this more flexibly. So what do I mean by that? So let's say that in my announcements, maybe I want to shout hello world. Let's get rid of this action here. So currently, the 0th element, hello world, is a lowercase string. And I want to do something like, I want to shout that string, where ideally it'd be something like actions.announcements.create.shout or something like that, where what it would do is make this an uppercase string and add some exclamation marks. And now reduce gives you lots of defaults. It doesn't give you like anything. It gives you sensible defaults to get started. But maybe you want to do some custom stuff. I just want to do something here. I want to do something, sorry, not an announcement. I want to act on announcement 0 because I want to act on that string, not the array. So that's the array, but now this is a string. So on that string, I want to do something to it. What do I want to do? I want to make it uppercase. And I want to add some exclamation marks. And now if I look at getState.announcements, hello world is uppercase with exclamation marks. So this means that you shorten the loop between here's a change I want to make in state and you made it happen. If you can describe it, then reduce lets you just do it and just get on with it. And maybe I really like the shout thing, actually. You know, I'm really happy being able to shout this, and I want to shout reduce is cool as well. So let's go back. Let's make it lowercase. Reduce is cool. And just like I shouted hello world, I also want to shout reduce is cool. And now I'd risk repeating myself by repeating this sort of thing. Do this. When I'm doing it more than once, I'm like, actually, it'd be nice if I could have that as a reusable thing, which just plugs straight in. So we're actually going to do that. So I'm going to write a custom reducer. So I'm going to say shout. But I'm going to take a string, and I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to return string to uppercase with some exclamation marks. And this should work for any arbitrary string. And I'm going to tell reduce, hey, here's my state, but also here's some custom behavior I'd like you to be able to do. I'd like you to be able to shout stuff. I'd like you to be able to shout strings specifically. So now let's go back to this. Rather than doing a do here, create, now I can shout. And it wasn't there before, but I've added it in. And now that means I can repeat that. So I can also repeat actions.announcements one. I can create a shout there and log out my announcements. And hello world reduces cool. So this is what I spoke about before with the write once, reduce anywhere. You write some arbitrary reduce logic and then just use it anywhere in your state tree. So that's looking really great. Maybe also I want to make an announcement about the number of attendees I have. So this would be something like, we have 9,000 attendees. I want this to be in my announcements array state. And in reducers, talking between different bits of state can be fiddly. But reduce makes it really easy. So actions.announcements, I want to make a change to this array. So I'm going to create an action there. And I want to do something. And I want to take my kind of array state, which is my announcements, or I might call this my previous state. I also want to look at my tree state. I'm going to spread out all of my previous state. I'm spreading out all of my previous announcements. I'm going to add in one new announcement and say, we have some number of attendees. And what number? Where is that? Well, it's in my tree state at attendees. And now when I check out getState.announcements, hello world, reduce is cool. We have 9,000 attendees. So reduce also makes it super easy to talk between different parts of your state, your tree state, which you might need to do. What else can we do? Let's say we're looking at we're ordering in some food for our attendees. We're going to get in some pizzas. We're going to get in some margaritas. And let's say we start off with, say, 20 of those. We're going to get in some pepperoni pizzas. Let's say we start off with 10 of those. We're also going to get in some sushi. And let's say we start with some nigiri. And we have maybe 100 bits of nigiri and sashimi as well. And we say 120 bits of sashimi. I'm going to get rid of all this. Now, I have my margaritas, I have my sushi. Let's just look at our food state at the moment. We've got pizzas and sushi. And these are going to get eaten, so people are going to eat our pizzas. I'm going to need to change the number of pizzas I have. And here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to do something like actions.food.pizzas.create, and maybe all pizzas are going to go because pizzas are popular. So I want to create a set all values to 0, maybe something like that. And then when I look at that, all pizzas, margarita and pepperoni should both be 0. I'm just going to quickly write this one myself. Set all values to 0. Take some object state. I'm not going to walk through my logic here, but basically, I'm going to take the keys of that state. I'm going to map those keys onto entries. Each key is going to become an array, key 0, and then I'm going to return my object from entries. The logic's not the important thing here. The important thing is kind of what happens when I pass it through. Set all values to 0. So this now works. This sets all values to 0 in my pizzas, and it means I can reuse that for my sushi as well. So I can do actions.food.sushi.create.set all values to 0, and log getState.food. And at this point now, both pizzas and sushi, all keys are 0, all values are 0, sorry, I should say. However, this isn't super reusable Because what I'd like to do is something like set all values to like 5 and set all values to 10. And that's more reusable, right? So how would I do that? Well, let's go back to our custom reducer, and there's previous state and action, right? And when you pass arguments through to action creators, by convention, they end up as action payloads. So I can stick that down as action payload. And I need to rename this function. And now set all values to 5, pizzas, all values of 5, set all values to 10 at sushi. Now all values are 10 in my sushi state as well. So that is a quick whiz through the advanced usage of reduce. So it really scales and lets you input in custom behavior and write once, reduce anywhere. The next thing I'm going to quickly show you is how this works with TypeScript. So let's look at our announcements, for example. Let me just ditch this all again. My announcements, maybe I would try dispatching and putting something in that. So my announcements, I'm going to create a push. I'm going to push a number of like maybe 74. And TypeScript, because reduce is written with TypeScript, is correctly warning me that, hey, what you're doing here, this is a number, but this should be taking a string. Why should be taking a string? Because this is an array of strings. And a number doesn't belong in an array of strings. If I were to change this to be an array of strings and numbers, then reduce is like, okay, fine, it's an array of string and numbers, so it can take a number. Or alternatively with TypeScript, I could kind of say this is an array of string of numbers, and then this works. Let's look at the custom stuff. So if I have a new kind of like shout all, where this should work on array of strings, I'll type it later. What I want it to do is return my array of strings and then map each string to uppercase plus exclamation mark. So I want it to act on an array of strings and shout all of them, basically. And I'm going to use TypeScript and say that is an array of strings. And then I'm going to put that in here, shout all. And now let's try and do that. Let's just actually have a look at our announcement state first. Hello world 74. If I tried to dispatch actions.announcements.create shout all, this is going to actually say, TypeScript is not letting me do this because announcements, shout all is going to cause a bug if it runs into an array of strings and numbers. Because if I call to uppercase on 74, it's going to throw an error. So TypeScript's saving me from making that mistake. So if we're like, okay, maybe this isn't an array of string of numbers, it is just an array of strings, and I shouldn't push that. Let's just comment that out. Now I can shout all. Get state dot announcement. And if you see, it's let me do that. It makes this available on any state where the state is an array of strings, but it won't let me do it elsewhere. So if, for example, on venue, actions.venue, which is an object, if I try creating a shout all, it's just like, what are you doing? Array strings.map, that's not a function on this thing here. So TypeScript stops you from making mistakes. And then it's really helpful if the power update with reduce is if we look at food, pizzas, and create update. So what update does is basically replaces the state where you've got there. And I want to update and I say, well, we're going to have pepperoni 0. TypeScript's warning me. It's saying, hey, what about margarita? You know, your state here, I know your pizza state has margarita and pepperoni. So you give me pepperoni, but hey, you got to give me margarita as well. And I'm like, thanks, save me, TypeScript. You got my back. Save me from making an embarrassing mistake. And then I can check out my food pizzas. There we go. So that's a quick whiz tour through Reduce. And so you can see whether you use Muse Reducer or Redux, you can just get rid of your boilerplate with Reduce. It's zero hassle, it's 2 lines to set up. Then you can reduce anywhere in your state tree. It scales flexibly, lets you use custom logic. You can write once, reduce anywhere, and it's strongly typed, works great with TypeScript. I was going to go through the React demo, but I don't have time. I'm just going to wrap up by kind of, if you want to check out the documentation, it's that link there. And it'd be great if you'd start a repo. Like this is the first time I'm actually publishing the library to the world. So check it out, start a repo, tweet something nice, that'd be great. And I'll be in the Q&A for questions, but I will quickly answer some stuff now in terms of the, I see some stuff about the plugins that I'm using, the extension. It's called Quokka, Quokka. That's how I was getting the sort of like the live feedback, what's getting logged out. And then Reduce, just to install it, basically, if you go to check out the documentation, so let me just actually open this up to finish off. You open that up there, you'll see documentation, and you can install npm install Reduce. I'll be in the Q&A if you've got more questions. I'd be happy to talk about how can you use this for React and stuff like that.
Thank you, Richard. I was really impressed of your coding speed. Like, seriously, reveal your secret. How long does it take to code like this? Like, or maybe, okay, how long are you working on this field?
So the reason why I can type so quickly, I think, is actually I started by playing the piano when I was younger, which really helps, obviously, because you're playing the piano. And then, yeah, when it comes to that, just transfers really nicely to touch typing. So I'm lucky.
Seriously, so yeah, like you're seriously lucky. I know, like now I'm thinking about how much time you can save by this gift that you've got.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's like because it's your brain and through the keys, it's just way quicker. It is great. So it's worth. There are sites you can do to practice your typing speed, which are also like quite good. So if you want to, get up, like you can practice and get better.
Thank you very much. And I see a few more questions addressed to you, and so we'll have a lot to discuss with you on our Q&A session. So see you later.
Yeah. Right. See you all later.
Bye.